All right, folks, we have been working for the last few days on simplifying square roots. And so today we are going to start learning to do some different operations with square roots. And we're going to begin today with multiplying square roots. So I would suggest before we get started that you grab your perfect squares list that you've made and have that handy. Now, multiplying square roots is actually a pretty simple process, and it requires that we do 3 steps. So step 1, when you're multiplying square roots, is to multiply the outside times the outside. Step 2 is to multiply the inside. Whoops. Let's try that again. The inside times the inside. And then step 3 is to simplify the answer. Now, this last step is the one that we've been working on. You already know how to simplify your answer. So that's where you'll use your perfect squares list and split the problem up into the 2 different square roots. Now, on these top 2 steps up here, let me make sure we're clear on something when we talk about outside and inside. When we have something like 5 square roots of 6, when I talk about outside, as in outside times outside, this 5 is the outside number. So it's the one that sits outside the square root. And then that 6 that we see there, that is our inside number. So in these steps over here, when it says outside times outside, that's referring to numbers that are outside of the square root symbol. And then inside times inside refers to numbers that are inside that square root symbol. All right, so let's do some examples. All right, first problem that we will do here is the square root of 27 times the square root of 5. Now, when we're looking at our 3 steps, first we're supposed to do outside times outside. I want you to notice that this square root doesn't have an outside number, neither does this one. So I don't need to worry about doing that. But next I need to do inside times inside. I have 27 inside of this square root, 5 inside of this one. So I'm going to multiply those together. 27 times 5 is 135. So that 135 that I just put down there, I got from multiplying my inside number of 27 times my inside number of 5. Now notice what that does. When you multiply the outside times the outside and the inside times the inside, that makes this one square root. And now we're going to simplify that one square root. So to do that, you are going to split it into 2 perfect squares. And remember that one of these numbers has to be a perfect square. We're going to split it into 2 square roots. The first one needs to be a perfect square. So this is where you'll go to that squares list that we made back when we started this whole process. You know that 1 squared is 1. You know that 2 squared is 4. You know that 3 squared is 9. That 4 squared is 16. That 5 squared is 25. That 6 squared is 36. That 7 squared is 49. I'll only do this one time, I promise. that 8 squared is 64, that 9 squared is 81, that 10 squared is 100, that 11 squared is 121, that 12 squared is 144. And I can stop here because notice 12 squared equals 144. That's already too big for my problem. So what I'll do is I'll start at 121 and work my way up this list and find the biggest number that 135 will divide by. 135 won't divide by 121 or by 100 or by 81 or by 64 or 49 or 36 or 25 or 16, but 135 will divide by 9, and you can use your calculator to figure that out. So the square root of 135, I'm going to rewrite as the square root of 9 times the square root of 15. 9 times 15 will give me 135. Okay, square root of 9, what can I multiply times itself and get 9? The answer is 3. What can I multiply times itself and get 15? I don't know, so I leave that alone. So my final answer would be 3 square roots of 15. So I want to point out something here. I'll draw a line right here. Whoops, not a very straight one. This up here above the line is the new part where you did the 27 times 5 to get the 135. All of this below the line is the old stuff, what you already knew how to do, which was simplify. So I want to point out there's not that much new here. You're just multiplying. An outside number times an outside number, an inside number times an inside number to make one root out of it, and then the remainder of that is just the simplifying that we had already been working on. Okay. So let's take a look at another one. For this one, we're going to multiply 3 square roots of 10 times negative 2 square roots of 18. All right, so let's go through our 3 steps. First, we want to do outside times outside. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. All right, next up, we want to do inside times inside. 10 times 18 is 180. So outside times outside gives us negative 6. Inside times inside gives us 180. So we have a negative 6 times the square root of 180. Now that is all of the new stuff in this problem. From this point forward, we just want to take this square root that we have and simplify it. So we are going to break this down into negative 6 times 2 different square roots. One of these needs to be the biggest perfect square from our list that 180 will evenly divide by. So if you take the numbers in your perfect squares list and start dividing 180 by those, you'll find out that 180 will divide by 36. It is 36 times 5. So we get a negative 6 times the square root of 36 times the square root of 5. The square root of 36, what can I multiply times itself to get 36? The answer is 6. And then the square root of 5 we cannot do. So we get negative 6 times the square root of 5. And when you multiply negative 6 times 6, you get negative 36 times the square root of 5 as your final answer. So again here, just kind of point out what's going on. Draw this line. Up here is the new step, the new stuff. Outside times outside, inside times inside. And then all of this you should already know how to do. That is just simplifying the square root. All right. Now, let's look at just a couple more examples that maybe have some variables in them. So let's do 4 times the square root of 6x to the 4th times 5 times the square root of 8x to the 5th. All right, so to do this multiplication problem, the first thing we'll do is outside times outside. 4 times 5 gives me 20. And then next up, I'll do my inside times my inside. 6 times 8 is 48. X to the 4th times x to the 5th is x to the 9th. Remember that you add exponents when you're multiplying. So now the multiplying part is over. I have done my outside times my outside and my inside times my inside. So now I take this answer and simplify it. All right, so the 20, I'm just going to bring down, and I'm going to take my square root and divide it into 2 new square roots, one of which has to contain perfect squares. So go to your list and find the biggest number that the 48 will evenly divide by. 16 is the biggest perfect square that 48 will divide by, and it takes 16 times 3 to make that 48. Remember then for your variable that you need an even exponent. 9 is not even. The biggest even number that we can get from 9 is 8. So we're going to make that x to the 8th times x to the 1st so that we still have x to the 9th power. And again, to come up with this, I'm just doing what we did last week. All right, so now let's go through and let's simplify a bit more. My 20 is still waiting around. The square root of 16 is 4. Remember that to take the square root of x to the 8th, you cut the exponent in half. So that would be x to the 4th. So when we take the square root of 16x to the 8th, we get 4x to the 4th. We can't take the square root of 3x, so we leave that part the same. And now one last thing to do. We can multiply 20 times 4x to the 4th, which will give us 80x to the 4th. And then we have the square root of 3x. So right there is your final answer. Now again here, just to emphasize that first part, this first step from here to here is the only new part of this. The rest of it is the simplifying that we've already talked about. All right, we're going to look at one last one. Let's do 2 square roots of p squared q times 7 square roots of p to the 3rd q to the 10th. All right, so first we multiply. Outside times outside. 2 times 7 is 14. Then we multiply inside times inside. P to the 2nd times p to the 3rd, when we add the exponents, gives us p to the 5th. Q to the 1st times q to the 10th, when we add the exponents, will give us q to the 11th. So after we multiply outside times outside and inside times inside, here's what we should have. Now it's time to take this and simplify it. So my 14 I'll just bring down, and I'm going to split my square root into 2 square roots. I don't have a coefficient in here, so I go straight to these variables. Remember that to take the square root, I need an even exponent. So I'm looking at p to the 5th power. That exponent is not even. The biggest even exponent that I can get from that is the 4th power, so I'm going to split my p to the 5th power up and make it p to the 4th power times p to the 1st power. When I look at my q, again, I don't see an even exponent. I see an 11. The biggest even exponent I can get from that is 10. So I'll do q to the 10th times q to the 1st for that. All right, so here's how it all breaks down. Next step in the simplifying process is to take the square root of p to the 4th q to the 10th. I take that square root by cutting the exponents in half. So that's going to be p to the 2nd q to the 5th. And then I can't take the square root of pq, so I'll leave it alone. Last step is to do 14 times p to the 2nd q to the 5th, which is 14 p to the 2nd q to the 5th. And then that is times the square root of pq. And there's my final answer. So to take you back to the beginning and make sure we've got this, when you're doing this multiplying process, these first two steps are the new things. You multiply your outside number times your outside number and your inside number times your inside number. And then this part of simplifying the answer is the old stuff. So you use what we've learned about simplifying to put that answer into its simplest form. That's it for today. You've got an assignment where you can try this and make sure you understand. If you don't understand or you have any questions at all, then please let me know.